Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. In today's live session, let's discuss all the important articles from economics which have appeared in various business related newspapers from 19th of March to 25th of March 2022. The first very important article which has grabbed almost the headlines in all the newspapers is India reaching the exports worth $400 billion. This is the first time ever in a year wherein merchandise exports have reached the target or have crossed the target of $400 billion. Now, what are the important points you need to understand with respect to this? First and foremost, Government of India set up a target of achieving 400 billion target of exports, that is a merchandise exports, for the current financial year. Now, even before the end of the financial year, that is 10 days before the end of the current financial year, government has announced that we have been able to reach the target of $400 billion worth of merchandise exports, and in the coming days, we will even cross more than $410 billion. And this is an achievement for a very simple reason. For the first time ever, we have reached and crossed this particular target of $400 billion. Now, what are the reasons? Why were we able to cross this particular $400 billion target? First and foremost, there is a recovery that is happening in the global market. For example, USA. This particular country is very important for you for a reason that India is the top trading country, or USA is the top trading country of India, and second largest trading partner is China. Now, out of the total exports that India does, around 18% of the exports generally go to USA. And for this particular year, this is very important. Why? The total amount of exports that have gone from India to USA have crossed more than $73 billion. More than $73 billion out of more than $400 billion. And it is not just sufficient to remember this. Also remember the next point. Compared to last year, the amount of exports have increased by more than 47%. And when you compare this particular $400 billion worth of exports compared to, let's say, the pre-pandemic era, in the year 2018 and 2019, the highest amount of merchandise exports that India did was $331 billion. And this year, we have been able to cross more than $400 billion. Second reason, it is not just that there is a recovery in USA, there is a recovery in other countries also. And when you see there is a recovery, the growth is happening. There is a very close linkage between the growth, the production, as well as the exports. With the recovery that is happening across the global market, these particular companies are stocking inventories. They are purchasing more and more inventories or goods, and they are stocking them. And as a result of this, exports from India have increased. Second reason. Third reason, rupee is depreciating. I hope you are reading the newspapers, and very often you will come across this particular article. Rupee is depreciating, and whenever rupee depreciates, the value of exports or the exports will become more and more competitive, and as a result of this, the exports from India have increased. In addition to this, there is one more reason, right? What are the reasons? List it out. One, there's a recovery that is happening in USA. Second one is, there is a rupee depreciation that is happening, which is adding to India's exports. Third one is, with recovery, more and more companies are stocking these particular inventories or goods. And the fourth very important reason is, the price of the commodities in the international market is increasing, is rising up. Now, how the rise in the price of the commodities will add to India's exports? Imagine you are a manufacturer, you are manufacturing a product and you are exporting this to the international market. And one of the raw material is a steel or an aluminium. When the price of this commodity rises up, raw material cost for you will increase, cost of production increases, and as a result of this, the value of the exports at which you are going to export, that will also increase. This is also contributing to more and more exports from India to rest of the world. So these are some of the reasons why India's exports or merchandise exports have actually boomed in the last couple of months, or let's say in the last 1 year. And one more noteworthy point here is, in last 12 months, that is, let's say from the last year April till the March here, in every month the value of merchandise exports that have been done from India on an average are more than $30 billion. Remember this also. Consecutively in the last 12 months, the merchandise exports that have been done have crossed more than $30 billion. Now, having said so, will this continue? Will this particular boom continue? Are there any concerns related to this? Yes, there are certain very important concerns. First one, with Russian invasion on Ukraine continuing, there is volatility, there is uncertainty that has been created in the international market. And that particular uncertainty might basically lead to effect on the global trade, which can have an impact on India's exports. First point. Second very important point. With this particular uncertainty, there is also another trend that is actually rising. That is, the central bankers in many countries are concerned about inflation and they're reducing the money supply. And the concern here is, with reduction in the money supply, the access to credit, let's say for the companies, will come down, interest rates will rise up, so the demand in these particular countries might come down. And if India is an exporting country to that particular countries, the demand might have an impact on India's exports. Right? So these are some of the very important concerns which might derail India's exports in the coming years. Right? So these are some of the very important points which have been provided here. Please go through this. Now, based on this particular graph, suddenly UPSC can ask you a trend-based question here. Just have a look at this particular graph. UPSC can ask you a trend-based question. And in this particular graph itself, there is a concern also. What is the concern? It is a fact that there is no stability in terms of exports which have been done. That is the merchandise exports which have been done from India. For example, if UPSC will give you a statement, merchandise exports from India in the last 5 years have continuously increased. Have a look at the graph, you will realize statement is wrong. And there is a second point which is a concern for India. What is the concern? With rising exports, understand this very carefully. With rising exports, the trade deficit in case of India also has increased. Right? In case of India, the exports have crossed more than 400 billion, no doubt. But with that, the imports also have increased. Imports into India also have increased. And as a result of this, the trade deficit that India has also has ballooned. But what can you understand from this particular graph related to trade deficit? If the UPSC will give you a statement like this, in the last 5 years, the trade deficit or the merchandise trade deficit that India has continuously increased, or consistently increased, wrong. Has consistently fallen, wrong. There is a volatility. There is no pattern here. There is no trend that you can observe. Right? In some of the years, the trade deficit is low. In some of the years, the trade deficit has increased, etc. Right? So have a look at this particular graph also. Now, based on this discussion, I have given an MCQ here. Consider the following statement. A country having a higher merchandise exports will always have a current account surplus. Underline the term always here. Do you think a country which has a higher exports in merchandise will always have a current account surplus? Not necessary. I'll repeat it. Not necessary. Because please understand, he is asking a question about current account. Within current account, there are visibles as well as invisibles. But you are coming to a conclusion based on only the merchandise exports, that is visibles, that there will be a current account surplus always. Not necessary. Best example is India itself. India's merchandise exports have increased, crossed more than 400 billion. But even then, there is a current account deficit. So it doesn't necessarily mean that higher merchandise exports means current account surplus. It could happen, but there is no guarantee. Because what if the remittances, right, the out remittances are very high? What about debt payment, right? What if it is also very high? In that particular case, or even in this particular statement also, it doesn't say what about imports of services. So there are so many other parameters which can have an impact and make a country's BOP as a current account deficit. So first statement wrong. Second, rising commodity prices have helped exports from India. Statement is true. This is straightforward, a statement I've picked up from various newspaper articles. So right option for this particular question will be option B, only 2. Next, very important article. There was a committee which was appointed by the Supreme Court of India which looked into the agriculture laws, and it has submitted the report to Supreme Court of India last year, but the report was made public very recently. So if at all a question is asked in UPSC, what kind of recommendations would you want to provide? Here are a set of recommendations in the agriculture sector. Now what are the very important recommendations provided by this particular panel or committee? First one, this particular committee recommends that we follow a process called as open procurement policy. Is it okay? We follow a process called as open procurement policy. Now what do you mean by open procurement policy? Under the concept of MSP, government announces MSP for 23 crops. But the fact of the matter is government majorly procures paddy and wheat. And in case of paddy and wheat, we follow concept of open procurement policy, which means any farmer within the stipulated time period meeting quality standards of the crop, if the farmer takes the crops to Food Corporation of India, then the Food Corporation of India shall procure it. I will repeat the statement here. What do you mean by open-ended procurement policy? Any farmer within the stipulated time period meets the quality standards of the food grains. If the farmer takes the crops to Food Corporation of India, then the FCI shall procure it and pay MSP to the farmer. This is called as open procurement policy. And the problem with open procurement policy is the government's subsidy burden would be very high because you are having an open-ended procurement policy. So this committee says, right, discontinue open-ended procurement policy. Do not procure more than what is actually required. Second recommendation is, whenever you procure paddy and wheat, right, fix the limits. Do not have an open-ended procurement policy. Fix the limits of the paddy and wheat that you are going to procure. Second. Third very important recommendation. If the government doesn't procure the paddy and wheat like it is procuring today, because around 35 to 40% of both of the crops is procured by the government. If the procurement of the government actually comes down, don't you think the supply to the market will increase? Yes, of course it will happen. And when the supply to the market will increase, market prices will start dropping, then the farmers' revenues would be affected. In that case, the committee recommends that have a concept of price stabilization fund for these particular crops. Is it okay? Have a price stabilization fund for these particular crops. Now, as such, there is already a concept of a PSF scheme. How does a PSF function? Imagine a farmer is there. The farmer will take the crop to the market, right, and he wants to sell the crop in the market, but the market prices are very low, right, because the supply is very high. Now it will affect the revenues of the farmer. But in another point of time, that is, let's say there is lower supply to the market, and when the supply becomes low to the market, the demand becomes high and the market prices will start increasing. At this point of time, when the market prices will skyrocket, it will have an impact on the consumers, that is you and me. So if the market prices are very low, will affect the farmer revenue. Market prices are very high, will affect the consumers. So how do we stabilize the prices of the commodities now? For that reason, in 14 and 15, government introduced the concept of PSF, which was initially under the Ministry of Agriculture, but now it has been kept under the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. Under this particular PSF, certain amount of funds have been kept by the government, and these particular funds will be given in the form of loans to central government as well as state government agencies. Is it okay? These particular funds are given in the form of loans to central government as well as state government agencies, and no interest shall be charged on this. And what is the role of these particular agencies? They will take the loans from PSF, and if the supply is too much in the market, they will basically take these particular supply or take the loan and purchase the excess supply from the market and hold on to the crops, and when the market supply is low, prices will start increasing. Again, they will introduce these particular crops in the market, thereby stabilizing supply, stabilizing market prices. So we already have this and it is under the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. And this committee says extend it, introduce the concept of PSF in other crops also, so that there is a stability of the prices of the commodities. Next very important recommendation, the prerogative should be given to the states in order to procure the crops at MSP. I will repeat the statement, that the prerogative of procuring at MSP should be given to states. Center should not impose, states should be having that particular power to procure as per their requirement at MSP. Next very important recommendation, either amend or dilute Essential Commodities Act. I'll repeat the statement, either amend or dilute Essential Commodities Act. And by the way, remember this, under one of the three laws, right, or the three agriculture laws, one of the laws was amendment to the ECA itself. And the most important provision that was there in the ECA that was proposed by the government was with respect to imposition of the threshold, or let's say stocking limits. There was a criteria that was fixed. Sir, what do you mean by this? Imagine you're a trader in the market and the commodity that you're purchasing and storing, it is covered under Essential Commodities Act of 1955. The government simply says that in case the market prices are spiking up, in case the market prices are spiking up like this, I will simply impose a restriction, I will impose a threshold on how much commodities you can simply store. That power is given to the government under Essential Commodities Act of 1955. The government basically wanted to remove some of the commodities under ECA, and when the ECA provision would be applicable, right, the provision simply stated that if the market prices, right, suddenly rise up by 200% in case of perishable commodities and by 75% in case of non-perishable commodities, the crop would be brought under ECA and automatically the storage or warehousing thresholds would be applicable. That was there under the proposal, right? That was there under the amendment to the ECA Act. But later Government of India has withdrawn all the three agriculture laws. Now this committee says that because you have very strict, or let's say you simply keep on imposing this particular threshold, storage or warehousing limits, and on ad hoc policy, right, because there is no policy right now to measure and implement the threshold limits, you are simply implementing, right, because you feel the prices are very high. So there is no limit which is fixed right now. On what basis you are supposed to implement? How should we measure and implement these particular threshold limits? There is no policy right now. It is simply implemented on ad hoc basis. Now this particular committee says that amend the ECA, water down the provisions of ECA. This is basically restricting the private sector participation, water it down. And what you are supposed to do now is define under what circumstances the provision on storage would be implemented. And as per this particular committee, if the prices of perishable commodities rise up by 100% and non-perishables rise up by 75%, only in such cases the warehousing limits shall be imposed under Essential Commodities Act. And the other very important recommendation is, right now the state governments impose APMC Mandi tax. Is it okay? Whenever the commodities are traded in the market, the traders are going to purchase these commodities, the state government imposes a tax and collects this particular tax. This committee says withdraw it, abolish this particular tax, do not have the Mandi tax. Now two things here. What is the reason? If you withdraw or abolish the Mandi tax, traders don't have to pay more money, so they would start procuring more and more. This will help the farmers. And second thing, if you abolish Mandi tax, there are certain states such as Punjab and Haryana who generate lot of revenues through Mandi tax, they will oppose it. In such circumstances, the panel recommends that have a compensation fund. Have a compensation fund, just like in case of GST, here also have a compensation fund, right? And the money that is there in the compensation fund, use it to pay for the revenue losses that would be incurred by the states by abolishing Mandi tax, right? So these are some of the very important recommendations that have been provided by this committee or the panel which was appointed by Supreme Court of India. Now based on this, I have given a question here. Consider the following statements regarding PSF. It is under the Ministry of Agriculture, I have already told you, Ministry of Consumer Affairs. covers only the central government agencies? No. The central government, union territory and state government agencies are covered. Both the statements are wrong. Right option will be option D. Next article. One more parliamentary panel has given certain very important recommendations with respect to free trade agreement. Now what are the important recommendations here? First and foremost, this panel says that the government of India is delaying, or there is a delay in signing the free trade agreements. So government of India should speed up signing of these particular agreements. Why? Sooner you sign the agreement, right, the sooner you will be able to get the benefits from this agreement. So sign or firm up these particular agreements as soon as possible. Second, whenever you sign the agreement or these FTAs, try to include a provision for reviewing the agreement. I will repeat the statement here. Try to include a provision for reviewing this particular free trade agreement. Why? Between 2006 to 2011, right, have a look at this. Between 2006 to 2011, Government of India has implemented or has brought into force around 6 FTAs. But out of these particular 6 FTAs, in 5 FTAs, the trade deficit of India has actually increased. So there is a concern amongst the government officials, or let's say the government itself, that if they sign the agreements, the trade deficit of India is increasing, which means the other country or other party is getting the benefit. We are unable to leverage these particular agreements. So what you can do is include a provision to have a midterm review of these particular free trade agreements, so that once you implement or bring it into force, after a couple of years you realize, okay, this agreement is not working in my favor, you can simply rework this particular agreement. That is the second very important recommendation. Third one, have the foreign trade policy as soon as possible, because the last foreign trade policy was implemented from 2015 to 2020, and during 2020, where we were supposed to implement a new foreign trade policy, there was a pandemic. Government said we will extend the same FTP. It was again extended till the end of financial year 22. Now government says that it will be extended till the end of September 2022. That is half of the next financial year. But this panel says, right, how many years will you keep on using the same FTA, right, of FTP? Have a new foreign trade policy, because it will create certainty. It will provide certain cushion to the market as to what is exactly your new FTP. That is a third very important recommendation. Fourth very important recommendation, enter into those particular agreements wherein the other countries want to invest in India. Understand the statement here. Enter into those particular free trade agreements wherein the investors from other countries want to invest in India. Why? Right, there is a strategy which is being followed by some of these particular countries, and the name of the strategy is China plus one. Okay, China plus one, wherein rather than investing and developing a manufacturing facility only in China, they want to spread this particular manufacturing activity in other countries also. Right, so focus on those particular agreements wherein those particular countries or other countries, there are investors who want to invest in other countries. So leverage those particular agreements. Right, that is fourth very important recommendation. Fifth very important recommendation related to special economic zones, related to SEZs. Very recently, Government of India has already announced that they want to restructure the policy of special economic zones. That's the first point. Second, more importantly, those particular units which will start manufacturing by the end of June 2020. Remember this. Only those manufacturing units which will start manufacturing or production before the end of June 2020 would be given the income tax exemption. Because under the SEZ policy, remember this, 15 years worth of IT exemption would be provided. Again, it is not uniformly 100%. First 5 years, 100% IT exemption. Next 5 years, 50%. And next 5 years, based on your plowed back, right, or the investments out of your profits, certain exemption in IT is given. But that particular clause has been ended, right? That is, Government of India simply said, we will have a sunset clause, and that sunset clause has been utilized or implemented by the government from June 2020. So if you are a production unit or let's say manufacturing unit, you set up manufacturing unit within SEZ, but the production starts after 30th June, you will not be given access to this particular IT exemption. You will have to pay income taxes as usual. So sunset clause has been implemented by the government now, or has been utilized by the government, and the MAT is also applicable. Minimum alternate tax is also applicable on the units set up in SEZ. And this committee says, if you withdraw these kind of exemptions or the benefits to the units present in SEZ, SEZs will start losing competitiveness, and there will be no interest amongst the investors to invest within SEZ. So do not do that. Continue with these particular benefits. Extend these particular benefits. And the sixth very important recommendation given by this particular panel is, the scheme of RoDTEP has been launched by the government. Okay, remission of duties, taxes on export products. Scheme has been launched. But there are certain sectors, for example, organic, inorganic chemicals, right, etc. There are certain sectors which are not covered under RoDTEP. And this panel says, don't do that, cover them also, include them also. Now if you ask me, sir, why is Government of India not including some of these particular sectors? The reason is, government says that these sectors are accounting for a lot of exports. Is it okay? These particular sectors, right, are accounting for a lot of exports, and these are already developed sectors, so I do not want to give the subsidies to these particular sectors. Right, but this committee says, or this panel says, don't do that, continue, right, cover them also, give them exemptions. Okay, so these are some of the very important recommendations that have been provided by a parliamentary panel regarding free trade agreements. Next, related to concept of green bonds. In the recently announced budget, Union government has stated that they will be issuing sovereign green bonds. Okay, what do you mean by sovereign green bonds? These are the bonds which are issued by the government. Whenever you come across the term sovereign, very simple, related to government. Right, so Government of India would be issuing sovereign green bonds in the next financial year. And as per various newspaper articles, in the first half of the next fiscal, government would be issuing somewhere around 24,000 crore worth of sovereign green bonds. Right, this is, right, the information. But why this is being discussed in the article? Some days ago, the European Union, EU, also announced that they would be issuing huge value of sovereign green bonds. Is it okay? The European Union also announced that they would be issuing huge value, a mega issue of sovereign green bonds would be conducted. Now, this particular announcement basically has rattled the issuance in case of India. Rattled in the sense, we are concerned about the EU announcement now. Why? First and foremost, understand this. European Union has announced this because they want to reduce the dependency on energy supply that they have from Russia. Around 40% of energy requirement of European Union actually comes from Russia, that is gas. Now they want to reduce this particular dependence by promoting more and more green energy projects within European Union. And the concern related to this is, if European Union conducts issuance of large value of these particular green bonds, lot of investments will flow into these bonds. Investors are always interested in investing on the green bonds. So if European Union conducts a mega issue of it, lot of investments will go into these particular bonds. And as a result of this, next financial year, when Government of India will start issuing these particular bonds, then the Government of India might be forced to pay higher rate of interest on these particular bonds. Because let me give a very simple example. Imagine 10 investors are there. You are issuing a bond. So there are 10 investors who will demand these particular bonds. But out of these 10 investors, imagine 4 of these investors will go and purchase, let's say, bonds of another government. For example, European Union bonds. As a result of this, now there are lesser investors. When lesser investors are there, I will have to offer more rate of interest to attract the investment. So the concern here is, if the European Union goes ahead, issues these particular bonds, then some of these investments which will go into the bonds will not be available for India, and Government of India might be forced to pay higher rate of interest on the sovereign green bonds that they have proposed to issue in the next financial year. So this is the gist of the article provided here. And moreover, understand this. if India does this, as per the article, understand this, if India does this in the next financial year, it will become a market leader, especially within the BRICS community. Why? Within the BRICS community, India will be the first country to issue a sovereign green bond. Is it okay? Within the BRICS community, India will be the first to issue a sovereign green bond. And right, as a result of this, understand this, as a result of this, India's credentials in the global market will improve, definitely. Because if you have been following the newspaper, Government of India has kept on announcing a lot of reforms in the green market, or let's say renewable energy market as such. For example, by 2070, Government of India says will become carbon neutral market. By 2030, we want to make railways carbon neutral. Right? By 2030, we want to have 500 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity in India. So these are some of the very, very important points related to the article. Now, one of the question, or let's say a statement that could be used in the UPSC prelims is, which country has the highest issuance of green bonds in the international market? And the information is provided in the same article. That is, the article says that out of $194 billion worth of green bonds issued so far, the highest amount has actually come from France. Highest amount is actually from France, and which accounts for $51 billion. So remember, this particular factual information could be asked in the UPSC prelims. Done? So these are the very important points given in the article. Now based on this, I have given a question. Consider the following statements. FDI up to 100% through approval route is allowed in the renewable energy sector in India. FDI up to 100%, is it allowed? Yes, but the statement is wrong because of this. Right? They are saying approval route. No, it is not approval route. It is through automatic route. Remember this. It is through automatic route. First statement is wrong. Green bonds have been issued for promotion of electric vehicles production. Very tricky statement. Right? Because generally in the books that you are reading, they will tell you that green bonds are related to solar energy project, wind energy projects, low emission transportation, green buildings, etc. Will they be issued to promote even electric vehicle production? Statement is true. I'll give you the current affairs related point here. Ford has actually issued such green bonds. Ford company, right? Ford company has actually issued certain green bonds using the funds from which they want to promote electric vehicle production. So second statement is true. Right option will be option B here. Next article, land reform which has been announced in Bihar. Now again, I don't expect these kind of questions to be asked in UPSC prelims, but definitely yes, land reforms is a very important area for you, can be asked in the UPSC mains. Now what is this land reform article provided here? Very recently in Bihar, they have passed Land Mutation Amendment Bill of 2021. I'll repeat it. Very recent in Bihar, they have passed, that is Bihar Legislative Assembly has passed Land Mutation Amendment Bill 2021. Some of you might be thinking, sir, what do you mean by land mutation here? Imagine here is a person A, he will sell the land, that is a property, to another person B. It is not just that the sale is happening, money is changing hands. No. Once the sale is conducted, now the documents will have to show that it is person B who is actually owning the land. And please remember this also, in addition to the document, there are survey maps. Is it okay? The revenue officers generally have survey maps. Even the survey maps should indicate the same. And whenever this particular change in the records, that is change in the revenue records is done, it is called as land mutation. Is it okay? Whenever the titles in the survey records are changed, that is the records now will show that it is person B who is owning the land, not person A. And that particular process is called as land mutation. Now the problem here is, generally understand this, there are documents to prove that person B will own the land. Is it okay? There are documents to prove that person B owns the land. But if the records are not updated, generally the survey maps will not indicate. And as a result of it, many of the times, these particular land parcels, or let's say the land units, right, there's a dispute, legal disputes on this. For example, in this particular article itself, right, since February 2021, There have been more than 37,000 cases related to land disputes in Bihar alone. So you can imagine throughout India how many land dispute cases would be filed. And land is a very important resource. Right? Go back to the basics of economics. You must have heard of 4 factors of production. What are the 4 factors of production? Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. The first factor itself is land. Although the real meaning of factors of production is something different, but land is a very important resource for you. You want to promote manufacturing activity. You want to develop, let's say, national highways. You want to develop industrialization. You require to acquire land. If the land titles are not clear, it becomes very difficult for you to acquire and develop, because once you acquire, somebody might go to a court, file a case, and the land will fall into litigation. And many projects have been stalled because of this only. Now, what has been proposed by Bihar government here? Bihar government basically says, now whenever the sale of the land will happen, whenever the land will transfer or change the ownership like this, automatically the mutation would happen. Is it okay? Automatically the mutation would happen. That is, they have launched something called as village digital maps. Digital maps for villages. And whenever person A will sell the land to person B, automatically in the documents, that is the revenue records, the name will change, title will change. But in addition to this, even in the survey maps, right, the title will automatically change. And the benefit of that, the article says that if you want to invest somewhere and you want to purchase a land, now online you can check whether this particular land is owned by person A or person B. Right, so these are some of the very important points related to the Bihar Land Mutation Amendment Bill of 2021. Next article related to rice exports and peace clause. Again, I will not discuss about rice exports because in the last 1 week or let's say 2 weeks, we have discussed that. But what is there in the article? What is relevant? What is the next part of the story here? India is exporting rice, agreed, all of us know that. In case of India, government of India procures food grains such as paddy and wheat, all of us know that. But the problem here is, understand this, whenever government of India conducts these particular procurement, that is under the concept of public stock holding, there is right agreement on agriculture, AOA, and under which there is a de minimis clause or a de minimis level, which says that the amount of aggregate measure of a support, AMS, the amount of AMS that a developing country provides should not be more than 10% of value of production. Is it okay? The amount of AMS that a country provides should not be more than 10% of value of production. And in case of developing countries, there is a provision that is available which is called as a peace clause. And this particular peace clause was entered into Bali Conference or Bali Agreement back in the year 2013. The conference was held in 2013, but the peace clause was entered into the agreement in 2014. It simply says that there will be protection for the developing countries even if they cross right the 10% limit. Even if they cross the 10% limit, we will protect the developing countries. No other country can file a complaint against them. This is the story so far. Has the peace clause been used by any country? Yes, India is the prime example for it. India is the prime example. India has claimed that in 2019 I gave subsidies, it has crossed more than 10%, but I will use peace clause. In 2020 I have given subsidies, it has crossed more than 10%, I will use peace clause, which means even though I have violated this particular 10% level, no other country can file a complaint against me. This is the story so far. Let's now look at what is the next part of it. USA very recently has raised an issue with respect to this. And the concern that USA has raised is very simple. You are using peace clause, but there are certain conditions which are attached to peace clause. I will repeat the statement. Government of India is using peace clause, it is protecting itself from any complaint that could be filed by other countries, but there are conditions attached to peace clause. India is not following the conditions. India is not abiding by the conditions. Now what are the conditions? Have a look at these conditions very, very carefully. 1. whatever is the AMS provided by the member country, that is a developing country, it should be related to public stock holding only, right? This particular subsidy should be related to public stock holding only. You cannot use the subsidy for any other purposes. If you do that, you are violating. First one. Second one, you are using AMS, that is in case of India, best example of AMS is MSP. You are procuring food grains, do that. But if you are going to cross the 10%, then there is a Committee on Agriculture, COA within WTO. Is it okay? There is a Committee on Agriculture, that is a COA under WTO. Please notify COA. If you are in a danger of crossing it or you have already crossed it, notify COA. Second condition. Third condition, annually you are conducting procurement operations under public stock holding. Please notify how much money you are spending, what crops you are procuring. Please give us the details. That is the third condition. Fourth very important condition, the public stock holding or the procurement that you are doing should not distort the trade. Is it okay? It should not distort the trade. And second, it should not affect food security operations of another country. These are the four very, very important conditions that are attached to peace clause. Now, USA claims that India is not following them. And what is the argument of USA? In that case, I will raise the demand for consultation. Remember this. USA says, I will raise the demand for consultation. And if this particular demand for consultation is accepted, then India has to prove that it is following or abiding by all the conditions. And if India fails to prove that, then this particular protection that is given to India under the peace clause can be withdrawn by WTO. Right? So this is there in the newspaper. Please follow this particular article very, very carefully. Done? Okay. So this is one more article. Next, Reserve Bank Innovation Hub. RBIH, Reserve Bank Innovation Hub. Now what is this Innovation Hub? Right, RBI has set up this particular Innovation Hub in Bangalore. That's the first point. It has set up this particular Innovation Hub in Bangalore. It was announced initially in the year 2020 and finally now it has been set up. Second very important point, it is set up under Section 8 of Companies Act of 2013. Remember this. It is set up under Section 8 of Companies Act. And whenever you are talking about Section 8 companies, these are non-profit organizations, NPOs, non-profit organizations. For example, you must have heard of CII or FICCI for that matter, or Infosys Foundation, Wipro Foundation. All these are the examples of non-profit organizations themselves. Next, the capital of 100 crore rupees, right, which has been contributed for setting up of Innovation Hub, has been done by Reserve Bank of India. And this Innovation Hub will be completely owned subsidiary of Reserve Bank of India. Then these are certain very, very important points. Now, what is the role of Innovation Hub? Right? What is the function? This Innovation Hub, first and foremost, will be looking at mentoring some of the very important startups. Is it okay? There are certain startups which have the potential. The Innovation Hub will provide mentorship to all of these particular startups. First thing. Second thing, it will promote financial inclusion. It will promote financial inclusion. How? If there are any financial technological companies or fintech companies which are developing, let's say, patents, which are developing certain other types of systems which can be used to promote or provide certain services to poor people, or let's say people living in the lower tier in the society, then the RBI Innovation Hub will develop an ecosystem and promote the development of these kinds of products. Third, it will also be involved in consultation with Government of India and various ministries and departments within Government of India. If there are any problems, they will try to find out a solution for this particular problem under these particular ministries. So these are some of the very important functions which are attached to the Innovation Hub. Now I have given an MCQ for this also. Which of the following are the subsidiaries of Reserve Bank of India? Subsidiaries means which are set up as an individual unit or individual entity but are owned by someone else. So DICGC, Deposit Insurance Credit Guarantee Corporation, is it owned by RBI? Yes. RBIH, just now we have discussed this. There is Reserve Bank Innovation Hub, yes. Indian Financial Technology and Allied Services, yes. BRB NMPL, Bharatiya Reserve Bank Note Mudran Limited, yes. All these are the subsidiaries under the Reserve Bank of India. Right option will be option D, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Next article related to crop insurance. Very recently, Maharashtra government has announced that they will also have their own crop insurance. Is it okay? The government of Maharashtra has announced that the farmers are paying premium, state government is also paying part of the premium, right, and central government also will pay certain premium amount as such. But the benefit of this is not reaching to farmers. As per the statements given by various ministers from Maharashtra government, the premium is paid, but the farmers are getting very low amount of insurance recovery. Second, and in many of these particular cases, the insurance amount that is paid is delayed by the companies. And because of this, the Maharashtra government simply says, we will follow Gujarat model now. Is it okay? We will follow Gujarat model. What is this Gujarat model? Gujarat state government some months ago, let's say a couple of years ago, announced that they will not be joining Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. They will have their own insurance, right? The state government itself will have their own crop insurance, right? And it is having a name of the Chief Minister's Farmers Sahay Yojana, okay? Right? So there is a name for it. So state government has its own crop insurance. And now Maharashtra government says, we will simply follow the footsteps of Gujarat. We will also have our own crop insurance, right? Apart from this, there is nothing else. Certain data is given, how much claims have been announced, right? How much premiums have been paid, etc. Should you remember all of this? Absolutely not. Don't mug it. Okay, so these are the only 2 points which are important from this particular article. Now the last article for the day, tax buoyancy. Now what is the reason I've picked up this particular article? Very simple. Tax buoyancy is set to reach an all-time high, and as per this particular article, the tax buoyancy for the current financial year, that is fiscal 2022, will be reaching 3. Now what is the meaning of it? UPSC can ask you this particular terminology. That is the reason I've picked up this article. What do you mean by tax buoyancy? Tax buoyancy basically measures the percentage growth rate in the tax revenues divided by percentage growth rate in the GDP. Is it okay? From 1 year to next year, whenever you compare the data by how much percentage the tax revenues have increased and divided by how much percentage GDP growth rate has been achieved. And what is the importance of this? Tax buoyancy always gives a very good indication of how the policies of the government are actually working. If government has implemented, let's say, a structural reform such as GST, so what is the tax buoyancy in case of, let's say, indirect taxes? If I measure that, right, will I not come to know how GST has affected the tax revenue collection of the government? Definitely yes. Using the tax buoyancy, government can also decide whether the fiscal sustainability will be done in a time period or not, whether they will be able to generate certain amount of revenues to repay the debt or not. That is the reason the government usually measures tax buoyancy. And as per this particular article, the tax buoyancy that will be achieving in the financial year 22 will be 3, and this will be the highest all-time high of 3 as such. Right? And what is the connection between the tax as well as GDP? Some of you might be thinking, sir, why are we comparing tax with GDP? A simple reason is, whenever there is a GDP growth rate, what does it mean? The production of goods and services has increased. Income generated in the economy has increased. Consumption of goods and services has increased. Now, when all of this is increasing, don't you think the tax revenue collection of the government should also increase? And that is the reason we always compare the percentage growth rate in the tax revenue to percentage growth rate in the GDP. Right? And that is the concept of tax buoyancy. And please be very careful here. Do not be confused between tax buoyancy and tax elasticity. Because understand this. Government can increase the tax collection from 100 rupees to, let's say, 150 rupees. There are 2 ways. Really, the GDP grows, there is a higher production of goods and services, incomes have increased, and government has been able to collect more tax revenue. Can that be a reason to collect higher tax revenues? Yes. Or else, another reason could be, government has increased the tax rate. Is it okay? government has increased the tax rate, and when government increases the tax rate, automatically the amount of tax revenue collection will also increase. But whenever the tax rate is changed and as a result of this tax revenues change, that is called as tax elasticity. Whereas when the GDP value changes from one year to another year and as a result of this the tax revenue collection changes, that is called as tax buoyancy. Okay, so these are some of the very important points related to this particular article. Apart from this, sir, should I remember this particular table? Please don't waste your time. Table is not important. Now, these are the various articles as well as the questions related to these articles for the duration of 19th March to 25th March of 2022. If you like this initiative, hit the like button. Provide your valuable comments in the section below. And if you have not yet subscribed to BYJU'S Exam Prep, kindly do. Thank you. Have a great day.